She stood surrounded by billionaires, her custom gown drenched in spilled champagne as they branded her a cheap gold digger. They thought she was a nobody hunting for a sugar daddy. They had no idea the city's most ruthless mafia boss was watching, and he was about to collect. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria in New York City was a sea of baccarat crystal, towering white orchids, and generational wealth. It was the night of the annual Metropolitan Winter Benefactor Gala, an exclusive event where tickets started at $100,000 a plate. For the elite of Manhattan, it was a place to see, be seen, and ruthlessly judge anyone who didn't belong. And Vivian certainly looked like she didn't belong, despite the staggering fortune hanging around her neck. She stood near a towering ice sculpture, nursing a flute of Laurent Perrier champagne. She wore an emerald green silk Alexander McQueen gown that hugged her frame flawlessly, cascading down to a pair of Christian Louboutin heels. Around her neck sat a vintage Harry Winston diamond choker that caught the light of the massive chandeliers above. To the untrained eye, she was a breathtaking socialite. But to the predatory gazes of New York's old money, she was fresh meat. "I'm telling you, it's a rental," whispered Penelope Wentworth, a shipping heiress whose family name was plastered on hospital wings across the East Coast. Penelope adjusted her vintage Chanel shawl, her eyes fixed on Vivian with undisguised disdain. "Or she's keeping some geriatric Wall Street titan warm at night. Look at her posture, she's terrified." Beside her, Harrison Montgomery, a hedge fund manager with a notoriously cruel streak, swirled his Macallan 25. "I give her 10 minutes before she tries to hand a business card to the governor. It's pathetic what this gala has become. They'll let anyone in as long as whoever is funding them clears the background check." Vivian could feel their eyes burning into her back. She had spent the last 2 hours enduring the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom, dodging invasive questions from women in Oscar de la Renta dresses who wanted to know her pedigree, her boarding school, and, most importantly, whose bank account had funded her presence. She wasn't a gold digger. She was a survivor. Vivian's mind momentarily drifted away from the glittering ballroom, pulled back to a freezing studio apartment in Brooklyn 5 years ago. She remembered the smell of copper and cheap rubbing alcohol. She remembered pressing a blood-soaked towel against the ribs of a young, fierce man who had just been stabbed in an alleyway over a territorial dispute. Back then, there were no Harry Winston diamonds or Laurent Perrier champagne. There was only the harsh reality of the streets, scraping by on diner tips, and the unbreakable bond she had forged with a man who was destined to rule the city's criminal underworld. She had saved his life. She had hidden him when the feds and rival syndicates were tearing the city apart, looking for him. And when he finally rose to power, becoming a phantom, the city whispered about in terrified, hushed tones, he had made her a promise. "You'll never look at a price tag again, Vivian, and anyone who ever makes you feel small will answer to me." A sharp, deliberate cough brought Vivian back to the present. Penelope and Harrison had closed the distance, cornering her against the edge of the VIP lounge area. "Beautiful necklace," Penelope said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She leaned in close, the overwhelming scent of Baccarat Rouge 5 for $40 perfume assaulting Vivian's senses. "Though I have to admit, I'm surprised to see it here. Sotheby's auctioned that piece 3 weeks ago to a private buyer in Geneva. Are you Swiss, darling? Or just exceptionally accommodating to foreign investors?" Harrison chuckled, a low, cruel sound. Don't be rude, Penelope. I'm sure she earned it. It takes a lot of hard work to stay on your knees that long. Vivian's grip on her champagne flute tightened, her knuckles turning white. She kept her expression perfectly composed, a skill she had learned from staring down loan sharks and mob enforcers in her youth. These trust fund socialites were nothing compared to the monsters she had shared meals with. The necklace was a gift, Vivian said, her voice steady and chillingly calm. And I assure you, Mr. Montgomery, the only people on their knees in my life are the ones begging for a second chance. Harrison's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second before hardening into a sneer. Big words for a +1. Who brought you? Senator Mitchell, one of the Goldman board members. We know everyone who is anyone in this room, sweetheart. And you are a nobody wearing borrowed armor. I bought my own ticket, Vivian replied quietly. Penelope laughed loudly, drawing the attention of several nearby guests. Oh, please, that table costs $250,000. Unless you've been selling secrets or yourself on the black market, you didn't buy anything. You're a parasite, darling. A shiny, well-dressed parasite. The murmurs began. Heads turned. The old money crowd, always eager for a scandal, began to form a loose semicircle around the confrontation. They looked at Vivian not with pity, but with hungry amusement. She was the evening's entertainment. The gold digger caught in the lion's den. The whispers grew louder, a venomous hiss echoing over the soft jazz playing in the background. Vivian stood her ground, but the psychological weight of 100 condemning eyes pressed down on her. Let me give you a piece of advice, Harrison said, stepping so close that Vivian could smell the stale cigar smoke on his breath. Take the rental dress, take your little fake confidence, and slip out the service elevator. Before I call the gala organizers and have security drag you out for trespassing. Vivian locked eyes with him. Touch me or call security, and you won't have a career by sunrise, Harrison. It was a bold bluff, or so they thought. Penelope's eyes narrowed with venomous outrage. How dare you speak to him like that, you piece of trash! In a flash of calculated spite, Penelope stepped forward and subtly tipped her wrist. Her full glass of red wine cascaded directly over the bodice of Vivian's emerald McQueen gown. The dark crimson liquid soaked instantly into the delicate silk, spreading like a fresh wound. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Someone covered their mouth to hide a laugh. Oh, ma, Penelope said with mock horror, holding up her empty glass. I'm so clumsy. But honestly, it's an improvement. It makes you look exactly like what you are, stained. Vivian looked down at the ruined silk, then slowly back up at Penelope. The silence in their immediate circle was deafening. The gala organizer, a frantic woman named Mrs. Harrington, suddenly pushed through the crowd, looking panicked. What is going on here? Mrs. Harrington demanded, her eyes darting from Penelope to Vivian's ruined dress. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We cannot have altercations at the Waldorf. I was assaulted, Vivian stated coldly. She's a wedding crasher, Harrison interrupted smoothly. And an escort by the looks of it. Get her out of here, Harrington, before I pull my family's funding for next year's event. Mrs. Harrington turned pale and gestured urgently to two burly event security guards. Please, miss, come quietly through the back. Vivian didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply looked toward the massive oak doors at the entrance of the grand ballroom. I'm not going anywhere, Vivian said. He's here. Who is here? Penelope mocked. Your sugar daddy? Is he going to come in with his walker and defend your honor? At that exact second, the smooth jazz music abruptly cut off. The band on stage faltered as the heavy oak doors of the ballroom were violently shoved open, crashing against the walls with a sound like a gunshot. The two event security guards, who had been marching toward Vivian, stopped dead in their tracks. And everyone, the Gala, turned toward the entrance. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 6 massive men in tactical formal wear, was Roman Rossi. How was a myth made flesh, the undisputed head of the Rossi Syndicate, a man who controlled the city's underground ports, construction unions, and allegedly, half the politicians currently sweating in the ballroom. Roman was dressed in a flawless, bespoke Brioni tuxedo, the dark fabric clinging to a frame built for violence. On his wrist gleamed a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, worth more than most attendees' homes. His face was a mask of predatory fury, marked by a faint, jagged scar that ran along his jawline. A scar Vivian had stitched shut herself 5 years ago, complete. Suffocating silence fell over the Waldorf Astoria. Governor Mitchell, who had been laughing loudly near the bar, instantly lowered his drink and stepped backward, bumping into a waiter. Harrison's smug grin vanished, replaced by the pale, bloodless look of a man staring down the barrel of a gun. Even Penelope took a subconscious step back, her breath catching in her throat. Roman didn't look at the politicians. He didn't look at the billionaires. His dark, lethal gaze swept the room until it locked onto Vivian. He saw the crowd surrounding her. He saw the red stain soaking her emerald dress. The air crackled with lethal tension as Roman began to walk. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. No one dared to breathe, let alone speak. His heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor. His bodyguards followed seamlessly, fanning out and effectively blocking the exits. This wasn't a social visit. This was a lockdown. Roman reached the circle of elites and stopped in front of Vivian. The terrifying aura radiating from him was palpable. Yet when he looked down at her, the harsh lines of his face softened infinitesimally. He reached up, unbuttoning his bespoke Brioni jacket, and smoothly slipped it off his shoulders. Without a word, he draped it carefully over Vivian's shoulders, hiding the wine stain and enveloping her in his warmth and the scent of expensive sandalwood and danger. He gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing against her jaw. "Are you all right, Mia Regina?" he murmured, his deep voice carrying easily in the silent room. "My queen." "I'm fine, Roman," Vivian said softly, clutching the lapels of his jacket. "Just a little spill." Roman slowly turned around, placing himself between Vivian and the trembling socialites. The softness vanished, replaced by the ruthless mob boss who had buried his enemies in the foundations of the city's skyscrapers. His dead eyes locked onto Harrison Montgomery and Penelope Wentworth. "I seem to have missed the joke," Roman said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Someone want to explain to me why my fiancé is wearing a glass of wine?" The silence in the Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that preceded a devastating natural disaster. Harrison Montgomery, a man who had built his entire identity on intimidating junior analysts and hostile corporate takeovers, suddenly looked like a terrified child. All the color drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. Beside him, Penelope Wentworth's jaw was trembling so violently that the diamond drop earrings she wore clattered softly against her neck. "Fiancé," Penelope choked out, the words scraping against her dry throat. It was a fatal mistake, speaking without being addressed by the apex predator in the room. Roman's dark, hollow gaze snapped from Harrison to the shipping heiress. He did not yell. He did not raise his voice. He spoke with a quiet, lethal smoothness that carried effortlessly over the dead silence of the ballroom. "I asked a question," Roman said, stepping slowly toward the pair. Each step he took felt like a hammer striking the marble floor, resonating in the chests of everyone watching. "My fiancée, the woman who owns half of my empire, the woman who holds my life in her hands, is standing here drenched in cheap red wine. And I want to know whose blood I am going to use to wash it out." Harrison swallowed hard, taking an involuntary step backward, completely abandoning Penelope. "Mr. Rossi," he stammered, his usually authoritative voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror. It was an accident, a misunderstanding. We had no idea who she was. She was standing alone, and Penelope tripped. "I tripped," Penelope echoed, her voice a frantic, desperate whisper. Tears of sheer panic welled in her eyes, ruining her meticulous makeup. "I swear, Mr. Rossi, it was an accident. I lost my footing." Roman tilted his head slightly, studying them like a scientist observing insects before crushing them. He raised his right hand, and instantly a towering man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped out from the shadows of his security detail. This was Dominic, Roman's second-in-command and the syndicate's chief enforcer. Dominic did not say a word. He merely handed Roman a sleek, encrypted tablet. Roman didn't even look at the screen. He kept his dead eyes fixed on Harrison. "Harrison Montgomery," Roman recited, his voice devoid of any human warmth. "Senior partner at Vanguard Capital. You manage roughly $4 billion in assets. You have a sprawling estate in the Hamptons, a penthouse on Park Avenue, and a notorious gambling debt in Macau that your firm has been quietly covering up by cooking the books on your offshore accounts." Harrison's knees visibly buckled. A collective gasp rippled through the surrounding elite. Governor Mitchell, still trapped in the room by the perimeter of armed men, looked violently ill. Roman slowly turned his gaze to the trembling heiress. "Penelope Wentworth, heir to the Wentworth shipping conglomerate. Your family controls 3 major ports on the eastern seaboard. But what the Financial Times doesn't know is that your father leveraged the entire fleet against a loan from the Castellano family to avoid bankruptcy 2 years ago. A loan that was bought out by my syndicate last month." Penelope let out a stifled sob, covering her mouth with her trembling, manicured hands. The realization of what was happening crashed down upon the ballroom. This wasn't merely a physical threat. Roman Rossi had not just breached their exclusive sanctuary. He held the very foundations of their generational wealth in the palm of his hand, and he was about to crush them into dust. "You called her a gold digger," Roman continued, his voice dropping an octave, echoing with a terrifying finality. "You stood here, in your rented tuxedos and your inherited gowns, playing royalty. You looked at the woman who saved my life, and you thought she was prey." Roman took another step forward, closing the distance completely. He towered over Harrison, who was now visibly shaking, sweat pouring down his temples. "Let me educate you on who you just insulted," Roman commanded, his tone demanding absolute subservience. 5 years ago, I was bleeding to death on the floor of a freezing apartment in Brooklyn. A rival family had put 3 bullets in me. Every doctor on my payroll was either dead or too terrified to open their doors. I was a dead man. Roman gestured back to Vivian, who stood tall and unyielding beneath the protective weight of his jacket. That woman didn't care about my money, because I had none. She didn't care about my power, because I was hunted. She spent 3 days awake, digging lead out of my flesh with a paring knife and a bottle of gin. She stood between me and men who would have happily gutted her just for being in the room. She didn't dig for gold, Montgomery. She dug for my life. She built my empire from the shadows. Every port you use, every politician you bribe, every bank you trust to hide your dirty money. She helped me conquer it. The elite of New York stared at Vivian with a newfound, paralyzing horror. She wasn't a naive girl out of her depth. She was the architect of their destruction. She was the Mafia queen. Harrison fell to his knees. The loud thud of his tailored trousers hitting the marble floor echoed sickeningly. The hedge fund titan, the terror of Wall Street, was crying. "Please," Harrison begged, his hands clasped together. "Mr. Rossi, I'll do anything. I'll give you my shares. I'll transfer my accounts. Just please, don't hurt me. Don't ruin me." Roman looked down at him with an expression of pure, icy disgust. "Dominic," Roman said quietly. Dominic tapped the screen of the tablet twice. "It's done, boss," Dominic replied, his voice gravelly and devoid of emotion. Roman looked back at Harrison. "Your offshore accounts have just been drained. The SEC has miraculously received an anonymous, heavily encrypted dossier containing proof of your embezzlement, your fraud, and your gambling debts. By the time you walk out of this hotel, Vanguard Capital will have locked you out of your office, and federal agents will be waiting at your penthouse." Harrison let out a guttural sound, something between a scream and a whimper, collapsing forward onto his hands. He was ruined. A lifetime of cutthroat climbing, erased in 2 taps on a screen. Roman then turned his attention to Penelope, who shrank back, pressing herself against a marble pillar as if trying to merge with the stone. "As for you," Roman whispered, leaning in close so only she and the immediate circle could hear, "your father's debt is being called in. Tonight. The Wentworth shipping line belongs to the Rossi Syndicate now. Your family is bankrupt. You have 24 hours to vacate your properties before my men change the locks." Penelope slid down the pillar, sobbing hysterically, her designer dress pooling around her in a pathetic heap. The vipers of the Waldorf had been utterly defanged, their venom neutralized by a monster they could never hope to comprehend. The ballroom was paralyzed. The billionaires, the socialites, the politicians, all of them realized that the invisible hierarchy they had worshipped their entire lives was a fragile illusion. The real power in this city did not wear a tuxedo and attend charity galas. The real power kicked down the door, took what it wanted, and left nothing but ash in its wake. Mrs. Harrington, the gala organizer, looked as though she was about to faint. She took a tentative, trembling step toward Roman, her hands raised in a gesture of pure surrender. "Mr. Rossi," she stammered, her voice shaking violently. We apologize deeply for this incident. Please, this event is for charity. We want no trouble. I will personally see to it that these 2 are removed from the premises and banned for life. Please allow us to comp your table, whatever you want." Roman didn't even acknowledge the woman's existence. Instead, he turned his back on the weeping aristocrats and walked slowly back to Vivian. Vivian hadn't moved. She stood with her chin held high, the heavy Brioni jacket draping over her ruined silk gown. She had watched the destruction of Harrison and Penelope with the calm, detached gaze of a woman who had seen much worse things happen to much stronger people. Roman stopped in front of her, the cold, murderous aura dissipating the moment he looked into her eyes. He reached out, taking her hand in his. His thumb stroked her knuckles gently. "I told you I would never let anyone make you feel small again," Roman murmured. His voice, intimate, meant only for her, though the dead silence of the room allowed the words to carry. "They couldn't make me feel small, Roman," Vivian replied smoothly, her voice steady and commanding. "They are insignificant, but I appreciate the gesture." Vivian stepped past Roman, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. She approached the sobbing Penelope. The crowd instinctively shrank back from her, as if she were carrying a plague. Vivian looked down at the ruined heiress. "You asked me if this necklace was a rental," Vivian said, her tone conversational but laced with lethal authority. "You asked me whose bank account funded my presence here." Vivian reached into the pocket of Roman's jacket and pulled out a heavy platinum money clip, holding a thick stack of black American Express Centurion cards. She dropped the clip onto the floor, right in front of Penelope's tear-stained face. "I own the bank, Penelope," Vivian said coldly. "And the next time you decide to throw a tantrum, make sure you know who owns the floor you're standing on." Vivian turned away, leaving the broken woman on the ground. She walked back to Roman, sliding her arm elegantly through his. Roman looked at the surrounding crowd, his eyes sweeping over the pale, terrified faces of the city's elite. "The Metropolitan Winter Benefactor Gala," Roman announced, his voice echoing with absolute authority, "is officially over. My fiancée is tired, and this room smells like fear and cheap perfume." No one dared to argue. The band on stage was frozen. The catering staff stood completely still. Governor Mitchell had quietly slipped out a side door, terrified of being recognized. Roman snapped his fingers. Dominic and the security detail immediately moved, forming a tight, impenetrable phalanx around Roman and Vivian. As they began to walk toward the exit, Roman paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't drop to one knee. Kings did not kneel, not even for proposals. Instead, he opened the box, revealing a flawless, 20-carat, radiant-cut diamond ring that caught the light of the chandeliers and practically blinded everyone watching. It was a stone that belonged in a museum, surrounded by a halo of rare blue diamonds. Roman took Vivian's left hand and slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. "A reminder," Roman said loudly, ensuring every person in the room heard him, "that the queen of this city wears whatever she pleases, and if anyone ever looks at her with anything less than absolute reverence again, I will burn this hotel to the ground with everyone inside it." He kissed the back of her hand, his eyes burning with a dark, obsessive devotion. Vivian looked at the ring, a genuine, soft smile finally breaking through her stoic mask. "It's beautiful, Roman." "Only the best for you, Vivian," he replied. They turned and walked out of the ballroom, their footsteps echoing perfectly, in sync. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind them, leaving the elite of New York City in absolute, humiliated devastation. They had gathered to judge a nobody, to mock a girl they thought was beneath them. Instead, They had inadvertently summoned the devil, and he had come to claim his throne. As they stepped into the crisp winter air of Manhattan, a fleet of armored black SUVs was waiting at the curb, engines purring aggressively. Roman opened the door of the lead Maybach for her. Vivian slid into the plush leather interior, the ruined emerald gown now feeling like a badge of honor. Roman climbed in beside her, the heavy doors slamming shut and sealing them in their own private, untouchable world. The city flashed by, in a blur of neon and shadows. Roman poured 2 glasses of scotch from the car's decanter, handing one to her. "They won't forget tonight," Roman said, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. Vivian took a sip, the amber liquid burning pleasantly down her throat. She looked at the massive diamond, weighing down her left hand, then up at the man who had burned the world down just to keep her warm. "Good," Vivian replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "Let them remember. The vipers have been crushed." They rode into the night, leaving the shattered remnants of high society far behind. They were no longer hiding in the shadows of Brooklyn, and they were no longer playing by the rules of the elite. They were the apex predators of a city that bowed only to power, and together they were absolutely invincible. Did you enjoy this intense tale of loyalty, revenge, and mafia romance? If Vivian's ultimate triumph over the elite had you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button. Share this story with your friends who love a fierce heroine and a protective underworld king. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, twists-filled stories of power and passion. Drop a comment below on what you thought of Roman's revenge.